Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Human Design 101. After our 2 week break, I am very excited to be back with you guys here today as we are going to dive into a topic that I've been curious about for a while and how the universe works. I've been delivered a guest on a silver platter that is able to tell us everything and anything about human design, its connection to the nervous system, trauma, wounding, and how we can use our design to accelerate healing using a bunch of different modalities. I'm here today with Akary Busto. Hi, Akary. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Um, you call yourself an emotional biohacker, and I want to know in a second a little more about what that means to you. But before, would you share your design with the listeners? Tell us a little bit more about your type, your authority, perhaps your profile, and the channels that you have.
I am a 1-3 sacral generator. Um, very open. And it's really interesting because by design, I'm a splenic projector, which is always really fun.
Yeah.
I do have the 5734, which I think is my magic channel because not only do I have a lot of energy, but my intuition obviously is peak. I mean, I know things.
Okay, let's dive in. Tell me a little bit more about why do you call yourself an emotional biohacker? What does that mean? How does it relate to human design?
So I coined myself this little phrase of emotional biohacker because as I started working with people and diving in and doing obviously that one profile, right? That one line taking me down all these rabbit holes, I recognized that our healthcare system looks at people by pieces. You're a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit. And when it comes to nervous system work, there are so many pieces that go together that I go with the mind, the body, and the soul. It's taking into consideration that if I'm not taking care of my beautiful vessel, it's not going to get up in the morning. If I'm not putting the right fuel in my body, my mental health is going to suffer. So it's like a three-legged stool, right? Mind, body, and soul. And if one of the legs is broken, everything else gets affected. And so I had a lot of women come to me very, I'm not going to say broken, just there were so many pieces of who they were that were just fragmented. And putting it all back together needed for them to have some responsibility around movement, as you know how important that is, feeding their body, and actually meditating, connecting to self. And that is where the emotional biohacking came from, where it isn't just one thing. It's like we really have to go in and do several different things in order to get the emotional space to work. The way it relates to human design is that it gives me a really nice look at who they are by type because I do not believe in one to many. I believe it is a one to one because we're each uniquely designed. And as that, I treat the individual as that. And I give them my undivided attentions to make sure that the transformation actually happens, mainly because as we are rewiring the brain, it needs consistency. And if I have to be talking to 5 other people, it takes away from the opportunity of holding this nervous system with so much care that we can see some really amazing results.
This is the splenic projector by design.
I know it's so much of that of being in the moment and just taking the opportunity to dive deep with someone and it's deep listening, which obviously goes a little bit with my life and soul purpose, the Sphinx, right? Is just to be able to sit and listen to all of the stories and all of the secrets. And that really has been the biggest piece that I connected with my own design was just how exact it was when I started getting into it about how heart-centered my work needed to be.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, with the cross of the Sphinx, all the incarnation cross gates are in the G center. And one of the most important ones, obviously, the gate of the listener, which is what Akari is referring to right now for the people wondering and listening. Because even though this started out as Human Design 101, and you can find loads of the fundamental concepts in the earlier episodes, I feel like the listeners have grown with the podcast, and some of us listening today might be able to um, grasp these concepts. If you're listening right now and you're not really sure, that's okay. You will understand our conversation regardless. Um, I am honestly so excited that I don't know where to start. When I was reading about you and I saw you work with heart rate variability, you work with the nervous system, you work with wounds from a human design perspective, you work with the centers from a sensitivity and stability perspective. There are so many topics that I I'm really excited about. So let's see, what am I being drawn to first? Or rather, let me ask you, is there anything that you'd like to dive into?
I'm actually very open to having chats around any of this. This is, a big passion for me. And like you said, it's maybe not a conversation that we have had or that we have enough of. It is not mainstream to talk about nervous system and human design as a collaborative piece. But over the years, working with so many women with so much trauma and identifying how we can strengthen these things through tapping, through breath work, through just listening to them say these things out loud, it has really become a place that creates a little bit of a sense of relief for them that they can be seen completely. And that's, I think, my biggest takeaway from using human design is that people can actually feel seen and witnessed and heard in a way that they've never had before, even with regular therapy.
Mhm. Yeah, the approaches are changing as humans are changing, and it's really exciting that we have all these new modalities. Obviously, there's a sense of, okay, we kind of need to test what works and we need to make these decisions individually. But it is really exciting that we have so many modalities. And I think I want to start with the framework around the nervous system that you've created, which is called the Nervous System Codes Framework, right?
Hmm.
That combines trauma regulation and human design to help stabilize, I guess, the nervous system. And I wonder, because I've heard you speak about how does each center process stress, and how does definition in the centers versus openness impact that? Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that? Maybe you can give us an example.
So every center, right, has the ability to express something or to broadcast something. And so either it is going to be a stable space where consistent energy is flowing through here, or it's going to be open and there's lack of stability. And so we need to come in and really focus on that. The way that I look at this is, again, it gives me a roadmap for the client to see how we can approach this. Where are we at within resiliency? What's lacking? And the beautiful thing is they come in with a completely different narrative of their story. And as we are going through each center and explaining, right, like there's a lot of pressure in the head. And how does this relate to you? And someone could be, just for example, a manifesting generator with a lot of this energy that comes through, and it's very, very dense energy, and they just want to get their way. And they don't realize, they don't have any awareness around how this shows up. And so being able to tie that energy together with what's happening with this open center, so many times they're able to go, Oh, just showing up so intensely, and you as a projector would feel it. Because I have so much openness as a generator, I definitely feel it. It feels so dense, and I have to just stop and really recalibrate my whole sense of self around individuals that have this kind of energy. And so it's not personal, it's energy, but nonetheless they get an opportunity to show up different. And so as we start to educate around the centers and what shows up and their narrative and how they feel, because there's two ways, right? We show up unconsciously and we show up consciously. And I look at that sometimes as the fine line between arrogance and confidence, right? So we feel like we're showing up confident and we are very in our arrogance, but it really helps clearly define, because so many of us have never had an honest conversation with those around us who can say, ooh, when you do this, this is what shows up. And how does it feel? So no one has these honest conversations with you. And so it's breaking these things down because they've heard things before, especially when someone tells them they are too much. They take too much space. And so to me, all of that boils down to the nervous system, to patterns, to allowing you to feel safe in your body. So those are all the things that correlate together. So someone who is in that space, it's really helping them process that energy in a way that it feels safe and connected, right? Because that's the big piece with trauma is if you don't feel safe and there's no connection, that trauma is going to hang out there for a while.
Okay, so let's see whether understand you correctly. If I came to you and I said as a client, picking up the undefined head center example that you had, and maybe adding some undefined solar plexus into the mix. If I came to you and said, I don't know what's going on. It just feels like there is so much tension. I feel so ungrounded because I'm always listening to what's going on there and I'm trying to solve it and I'm trying to fix it, but it's just not really possible. What would you say to me? How would you
I
how
love
would you
that.
guide me to understand what's going on?
I love that because it brings a lot of different pieces together, right? The first one is that pressure on the head. A lot of it, we don't recognize this, but when we are in our mother's belly, when we are there, there is no filter. Whatever she's feeling, you're going to feel, and you're like tiny, tiny. So if there's levels of cortisol throughout that pregnancy, there's definitely some of that energy that is stuck in your body and that becomes so confusing to even decode, right? Like, what is this? And so many times, merely by educating someone and saying, listen, there are energies that you're carrying, but they don't belong to you. So all of that confusion in your head around trying to solve this one big thing and you don't even know what that big thing is. What would it be like if you could just let it go? And not forever, just let it go right now so that we can actually feel what it's like. So one of the things that I love with the Heart Math Institute is the sensor. There's a biofeedback sensor that they get. And when they get connected to this biofeedback sensor, what you think is calm is not always calm. If you can't measure it, you can't track it. And if you can't track it, you can't fix it. So all of these little things come to play. Allowing someone to recognize what their calm really is by tracking their heart rate variability, their, where their heartbeat is at, the resting heartbeat, creates a completely different level of the story, right? It's almost like it gets unveiled and they're like, oh wow, okay, so everything I've been feeling here, I don't have to feel, I have a choice. And we can process in so many different ways. We can process through tapping, we can process through breath work, we can process it through the biofeedback sensor, Or as we start to get our nervous system regulated, I was sharing with you that I do family constellations in the water. And one of the things about family constellations is it's all about systems and where we are in that system, in that family system. So if there was something abrupt that happened at home when you were growing up, and let's just say, for example, um, a father was absent, then all of a sudden you were you were parentified and put in a position of having to be a father figure when really all you needed to do was be a child. So growing up too quickly. And so when you are not in the space that in your place in the system, what ends up happening is that same processing of this just doesn't feel good in my body. And there's a lot of things that are coming up and moving around. With the open solar plexus, as we know, is there's just so many emotions out there that we're processing as well that are not always ours. And for me as a sacral generator, I have two modes. I either wake up salty or I wake up in a great mood. Like that's my pulse. It's either on or off. And so being around people where emotions are just really, really chaotic, another dense energy to deal with. And so processing the emotional solar plexus, I feel, is a lot more work than having to process the brain. The brain seems to understand logic a lot more, but emotions, they don't have any logic. And that's when we really have to understand where trauma comes in, because your brain, your amygdala, shuts down when something is whatever it, this is the ironic thing, right? If it considers it threatening, it shuts down. And so now all of a sudden you don't remember many pieces of your childhood. But that emotional solar plexus definitely remembers, because 80% of what we experience is in the organs. It's in these centers. And so it becomes very confusing because there's no memory of it. But the body, there's a book. The body keeps the score. And it's important to recognize that the body sends 80% of the information to the brain. And how many times do you open your mouth and something completely bizarre shows up, right? So the brain is processing so much information that's coming, and emotions are difficult for the brain.
Yeah, especially when we can't make sense of them, right?
Right, right,
Even some of them easy if we can make sense of them, some of them still difficult depending on your conditioning if you can make sense of them. For example, you know, did you grow up and anger was socially accepted? Were you encouraged to express your anger, or were you, being shut out for expressing anger? Were you taught that it's not, girls don't stomp, girls don't scream, girls are not loud, be a good girl, whatever, we know the good girl conditioning kind of.
right. Oh yeah, that's a really big one. And I think this is where human design comes in to give us so many permission slips to be okay with tapping into the things that we were conditioned to believe that they were not okay. And it's not just the conditioning, that the imprinting from our parents, it's also the conditioning from the TV shows that we've watched, the conditioning around the kind of friend circles that we're around. So all of that really creates these beliefs that either we're not good enough, we're not lovable, we're not worthy. And it is tapping into each and every one of these to see where is that hiding, and how can we give it light and love in a way that feels safe to process and to release and to let go.
Yeah. I want to comment on so many things that you've shared, and I think the first thing I would like to pick out is the awareness that people get by monitoring their heart rate variability in some way or another, whether it's an actual biofeedback device or a smartwatch or an Oura ring or a Whoop or whatever device you can use that you're wearing. I it is almost as though you're going to the doctor and the doctor is telling you that you are sick in some way, and this diagnosis gives you permission to change something about your lifestyle that you knew wasn't benefiting you, but everybody was doing it, so you kept doing it. And I remember when I was getting my Oura ring, and I saw my heart rate variability was crap. Oh my God, it was so bad. And I thought, I thought I was like very fit and healthy, and I was very, very low. And just because like, I had no idea, and because I learned, because I knew, I started studying. I started, okay, what can we do about this? How can I impact this? And what are the things that I can do to change? I started comparing it to my friends who also had some or devices, and we kept strategizing, and eventually it went up, which is great. And even though I am now right now in a very, I would say, personal stressful situation that has been ongoing for a while, it is still okay. It's not amazing, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, it's the consistency, right? It's creating that consistency and that safety, and that heart rate variability is amazing how much information you're able to get and understanding. And the Aura, I love my Aura ring. I love my Aura ring. And like I said, if you can't measure it, you can't track it, and if you can't track it, you can't change it. So you basically followed that process. And it gives you so much of a highlight. So I love gadgets. I'm a 1-3. I love technology. I love gadgets. I feel like there are so many resources out there. Why wouldn't you tap into one? It's the same as blood work. Sometimes when some of my clients are dealing with certain things, I will ask them to go get blood work and certain labs so that we can go over the things that they're able to shift and change in their diet, uh, because everything is entwined. If they're eating a lot of fast food and they don't have a lot of awareness around wholesome food, I will take time to explain and to teach and to help shift that mindset around food, because it's important. We're not going to be able to sustain, right? It's not going to be sustainable for the nervous system to remain in a great way if you're not eating very well. Like that's silly. It's like putting crappy gasoline into your car and expecting it to take off. Like it's not going to happen.
The same way you commented on earlier, it's like the holy trinity of mind, body, and soul. It is, we need the right fuel, but also just having the right fuel isn't enough. I had a dream the other night, and it was so telling for me. One of my good friends passed away about, I think, 2 years ago, and I dreamt about her, and I dreamt about being in her flat. And I opened the freezer and I saw all these very healthy meal prep foods in there that she prepared but never got to eat. And in my, like, the message was so clear. It was like, you can do all the right things and prepare yourself for a future, but if you're not living lovingly and consciously and present in the now, you might miss life. It is happening here and now. And that's what reminded me, and I really needed to be reminded of this. Yes, we can be so good at one of these pillars if we're speaking mind, body, and soul, but it's really important that we dare to lean into what doesn't come so easy as well. So if you're really good on the body side and you're eating all the right things, you're moving, you're breathing, you have your mindset in check. If you're not feeding your soul, if you're constantly in fear of, where am I going to go? What's going to happen? Um, or if we're looking at the mindset, if we're constantly in, oh, I'm not good enough, or I feel like I can't do this because, or I shouldn't do this because, or no, 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 no. We're not, we can eat the healthiest things, but life won't feel fulfilling. Our bodies won't be big and magnetic and open. And so it really is about bringing them all together. And I love that you do that in your work. And I love that you take the time to view your clients in this very holistic way.
Being human is very complicated. I think I have these moments where I leave the 3D for a moment and I recognize that living here on Earth is really processing a lot of the trauma and a lot of that ancestral, right? Through the epigenetics. The more we dive, the more we learn, we're recognizing how trauma travels through the DNA. And so that's the other piece when it comes to trying to process things is, wow, recognizing that life for my mother was not as easy as it was for me. My experience has been so much more freeing than it was for her. And then going backwards and looking at my grandmother, God, right? Like, doesn't get any easier. It just gets harder. And you're looking at it backwards and going, connecting the dots. So there's a lot of suffering. And so we look at where we're at in our lineage as women and how many resources, how much more education we have. And we are our ancestors' dream. We are these women who one day wanted to be able to travel, who one day wanted to make their own living, who maybe one day decided they didn't want a partner. We get to experience all of that for them. And so, of course, we're going to get triggered in ways that we don't understand because that fear that you were talking about, right? That fear lives in the brain. And that is the connection that I really try to disconnect, hijack the brain so that we can connect into our hearts. Because it is through the heart. I call her, I think the heart is a she for anybody.
Okay.
I call her she who knows it all. She who can predict the future. She knows everything. She and water are like the two things that I believe can do so much for all of humanity if we dare to connect. And it's through that process of rewiring all of these patterns that we learn to connect to the heart, to pause, to just pause. And saying it is easier than doing it because that reptilian brain keeps us so activated and ready to fight and ready to get involved in all of these things. And it is such an intuitive piece of who we are for survival. And it doesn't make it wrong. We're not making it wrong. What we're trying to do is recover, right? Recover from that and be able to ground ourselves so that we can make better choices. My big piece is teaching you how to respond instead of react. Because the one thing that we all get as an inheritance from our parents and our grandparents is a dysregulated nervous system. We come to this planet dysregulated. And so the work is to learn how to regulate because we're not being chased by tigers and bears anymore. And that is where the HRV comes in handy as well, because we know that cardiovascular health issues they're the number one killer of humans, both men and women. And even more so for women because we are understudied for cardiovascular health among many other pieces of who we are as women. So to me, that HRV monitor really tells us to be aware and to see where we're headed and especially if you are someone who experienced a lot of trauma as a child.
Yeah. I want to ask you, and this is going to be interesting. Do you see, from a human design perspective, do you see any trends, patterns, or correlations depending on, I don't know, type or depending on definition? Is there anything that stands out for you, something that you keep seeing and seeing over and over when working with clients?
You know, there's so many different variations because of that uniqueness. But my favorite thing to see is when I start working with manifesting generators and we start to slow down, which is very difficult. Here is what I get from them. They notice that they're not getting hurt, they're not bumping into things, they're not dropping things. So slowing down helps them be less clumsy, is what they say, but I just think they're just going too quickly and they don't realize that they're bumping into things. Uh, I think that's like my favorite my favorite thing that I notice with the projectors, which I absolutely love projectors, is more being in their bodies and understanding more of their energy, because they tend to just go with the flow of things, and it becomes more of a it becomes a people pleasing aspect of, I'm just going to do what you want me to do. And there's really, sometimes they lack the courage to speak their mind or to say no. And so working with projectors in that space has been very, very gratifying for me, because I have a lot of courage. And if someone says you're not going to be able to do it, I'm going to find a way to get it done, right? It's just my competitive nature. So being with projectors to co-regulate with them, which means that I am lending them my nervous system so that they can get stronger. It becomes a new pattern for them, right? The little synapses in the brain start going off, and it's so exciting to watch them courageously take these steps because they want to do the work. And I see them manifesting these amazing things in their work environments, wherever it is that they're at, changing maybe a position in their work where they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they don't feel recognized. And for some reason, they feel trapped in this space. So giving them the courage to go outside of that safety zone really is beautiful, because there's so much potential for so many of us. And I try not to fall in love with the potential of someone and give them the room, right? Their own unique room to step into whatever it is that they need to. So that's been really fun. And I think for some unknown reason, I get a lot of splenic projectors.
I get a lot of manifesting generators, and I'm just looking. You've got gate 41 as well, which is all about the fantasy and the falling in love with the potential, which is something I actually am actively working on, because it's unfair to people as well to meet them where we see them as opposed to meet them where they're at, as though
Yes.
that wasn't amazing and beautiful. And like you said, they get to unfold in their own way, not necessarily the way that we, you or me, might be able to see for them. And it's a real practice with Gate 41. It is a real practice, but it's beautiful and it's nice to be aware of it. And it's good to have this, again, the human design insight into, okay, well, this is why this is something that we can be aware of. And this is something that likely will turn up over and over again. And that is a practice area. I want to know from you, when you look at someone's human design chart for the first time, do you have a go-to thing that you like to look at? Do you intuitively let yourself be carried to where your eyes are drawn to? Is there one thing that you always pick out? Tell me a little bit more.
I like to see I love to look at the chart and then talk to someone and see where I picked up some of the nuances, right? That's always very exciting to be like, oh, I knew it. Like being able to say, yeah, that person, that must be a manifester, you know? It is very exciting for me to pick up on those things. The next thing that I really enjoy is to see how we bridge. So I look at the channels and the gates and what we have in common so that I know how we're going to strengthen our relationship and how we can work together to make sure that I'm respecting your energy. So I think like you said earlier, it is definitely meeting someone where they're at without having my own made up story of how this is going to look, and also allowing someone to unfold in front of you so that as they're unfolding, I would not be able to coach someone if I just told them what to do. There's no learning there. And so giving them an opportunity to experiment and to practice and then to come back and tell me what they tried and what they did and how that showed up for them, and then being able to say, well, I'm wondering if we do this instead of that. What do you think? And then just watching that unfold is really, really fun for me. And I think my gate 57 hits it. It nails it. And one of the things that one of my splenic projector clients says is like, you bloody knew what was gonna happen. And it's like, yeah, well, why didn't you tell me? Well, because you have to experience this on your own. You're a 3 profile. What do you want from me? And it's really doing that, giving someone permission to do that. And one of the things that a lot of my clients with children have to process is they'll have generator children, and they'll say, they're just not gun ho. They're not on fire. And it's like they have nothing to respond to that's going to create that fire. It is so different. They're not here to initiate, to make something out of, no. When you put them in the right environment, they're going to be on fire because they're responding to someone. And it's just like such a mind-blowing thing that we don't remember. And so as I'm working with my clients, especially if they have children, we start to bring their children into play, because originally my focus was to work on children. And I realized early on that it's not the kids, it's the parents. And then I thought, okay, so the man is the head, the woman is the neck, and she moves the head around and the body around. Therefore, I need to work with the neck. And that's how I really started focusing on women. The women's capacity. We're amazing. There's so much capacity for growth, and there's so much power and passion and the love, right? The amount of love that women feel moves mountains. And so that's how I decided to work with women, so that inadvertently I'm working with partners and children.
Yeah. That's such an interesting way to view it. But yes, of course, it's, I love this. When I started doing this work, I don't know how many years ago, I felt like when you start something new and you're very excited and you feel that everybody has to do what you're doing just because of the excitement that
Yes.
you feel, and you think this is a way for everybody will have to feel this and study this, and you'll all have to do shadow work and this and this and that. And you want to come for breath work as well,
For
you know.
sure.
And now I know that, first of all, it's not everybody has the same path. And just by changing one person, ourselves, we're able to impact our environment without even saying a word. And that's so beautiful, you saying the woman is the neck, because she will impact everybody around her, her partner, her children, if they are, her friends, work, everybody in the system, just by showing up differently. And that is something that you can't, in my opinion, you can't really imagine once you've experienced it, you really have to be it to be able to see the ripples. And it's scary as well, because sometimes you might not want to know your boss that you shifted personally. It might not feel safe to you to show up as this new version in work or in your family, or you might ask yourself, well, what will happen if I impact the system in this new way? And it's all, I guess, part of the process, but it's so beautiful to see. And women have such an openness that unfortunately I have not seen to the same extent in men yet. There are a lot of men who are so open to these kinds of things, and loads of them not yet. Probably same with women. But what I love about us is that we have this openness to and curiosity to learn and to grow, and this deep knowing of that there is more, and we want that. We want more.
It really takes us back to, the study of the Bible, right? I mean, it's all about Eve. Eve having the courage to change, to say, all right, like I can be here forever, but this is getting kind of boring. Like, I want more. I want to do more. I want to see more. I'm trapped in this darn garden. Like, let's go somewhere. Let's do something. Yeah, and even if you look at it from a Christ, the physical Christ with Mary Magdalene. Like Mary Magdalene is the wisdom. I really do believe, because I do work with a lot of men, I do believe that everyone has their place. Men can do so much work, but if they don't have a strong woman with them, their growth is very limited. Their growth is very limited. Women bring in so much wisdom and so many different perspectives, and we challenge the status quo. And there is a drive within us to want to continue to grow spiritually. And we are the spiritual leaders of our home. We really are the spiritual leaders of our home. And we do things that make better men. We can make better men. We cannot raise a boy to be a man because we are women. But we can help with our wisdom to create something so beautiful in conjunction with a man. And I think, so many different pieces. So many of us have been hurt by men and created, and it starts with that father wound. So that's another, the father wound, the mother wound, those are really big pieces that really forge our way in the world. We create these big heart walls. And when we create these big heart walls and we have this need for connection, that's very obvious to me, but not obvious to somebody else. Or someone who is emotionally, they think they're emotionally ready for a partner, but they're not, right? They're not ready. And it's that whole thing. It's that fine line between arrogance and confidence. It shows up in so many different ways for us. And lighting that fire, bringing awareness, and doing things gently to start shifting things. I've seen so many amazing things from the women that I've worked with, from mending relationships with family after being away from them for so many years, and now all of a sudden there's this unity. And in my life story, I have that same story where I had to change that narrative because I'm the oldest, so I was always used to being the one leading everything. And yet my chart says you need to lead from the back. And so once I started shifting in that way, my family dynamic with my family of origin just shifted completely. And I stop and I think, wow, I was the one who had to do the work. Me, the black sheep, had to do the work in order for the family system to shift and change, because now everyone's meeting me at that higher frequency. But it has to start with that courageous one that can see that something is wrong. And you can't fix anyone, you can only work on yourself. And by working on yourself, that energetic ripple starts to happen. You there's a thing, and there's studies about the nervous system. The person with the strongest nervous system wins. It's not the other way around where, and I'll give you the example. If there is a toddler at a restaurant and it starts to cry, the people with the weakest nervous systems are the ones that complain. They're the ones that get really triggered, and they want it to stop. And it's not to say that it doesn't bother me, but I just take a nice deep breath and I recognize that it's not personal. They're not in danger. They may, have gotten their parents a little upset, and so their parents are letting them just kind of cry it out, and that's going to stop. And you realize that those people who get triggered are the ones with the weakest nervous system.
Okay, let's say someone's listening and they're like, oh no, I always get triggered. What do I do? What's one thing that I can practice or look at from your perspective to start strengthening my nervous system? You want to share?
So this is the magic of working with the heart. And you can do this anywhere. It doesn't matter where you're at. For me, typically it's remembering to just kind of put my hand in my heart and remembering just to like be in my space and be still. So you want to do it with me? You don't have to hold your heart, but you can. Okay, so if you close your eyes and just start breathing nice and deep through your nose. And this is going to be real quick. So imagine that your heart expands with every inhale, 3 to 5 feet outside of your body. And with every exhale, your heart begins to soften. Inhale, it grows. And exhale, your body begins to soften too. And now I'm going to ask you to start breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Finding that easy rhythm that's just for you. And taking your time, there's no rush. When you feel that shift, flip your eyes open. What do you notice?
Amazing, thank you. Well, I love these tools. I've been obsessed with heart coherence lately, and so I've been practicing. I don't know whether you know Kimberly Snyder. She's written a book called The Five Stages of the Heart, and it's all about how heart coherence develops and what we could potentially experience in all these different stages. And I've been practicing with it, and there's once you drop in, for me, it feels really expansive, but also contractive at the same time. Like I can feel the energy being pooling around my heart, and there's an opening and a softening, and it's exhilarating and calming at the same time. It's really beautiful. What does it feel like for you?
For me, it is allowing myself to get out of my head and to take a moment to connect with my body. And not just that I can't control what's happening outside of me, but I can control what's happening inside. And so that gives me my power back. So if I'm somewhere where there are little toddlers and they're being toddlers, it gives me an opportunity to appreciate where they're at and not make it my business, right? Like I'm going to stay in my own lane and I'm going to create this bubble of joy around me where I can just live in my own little bubble of joy. And what's so interesting is there are so many studies that, and I think personal experience, when we walk into a space and we feel some negative energy, we immediately allow that negative energy to come forth and take control of who we are. And it is not about that. It really is about your nervous system being resilient enough to not have any of that energy sway you back or forth, that you can actually stay grounded in who you are and not allow something like someone else's energy. Like they say, oh, a bad mood makes everyone else feel that way. And it's like, no, I'm not giving permission to that kind of energy in my life.
Yeah, it's the conscious effort, so to say. And what is interesting about that is I noticed that with clients, you get to a place where you realize only from this state that you're describing, from this kind of regulated, grounded state, which of course we're not in all the time, and that's not really what it's about either. It's about returning to that state, but only from that state you feel like you have capacity to even begin to perceive people to where they're at. Because before, when everything is coming in as a threat or a potential threat, and you're guarded, and your mindset is looking out for what did they say, or what could they say that potentially could harm me, or how could I be wronged, or what can I do to be perceived as not a threat, or there's so many, like the hypervigilance really is what I'm describing. Only when you come out of that, you can recognize and realize what is really going on in people. Because before, everything is kind of this is like big knot around you, and I feel like people are not in reality. And I'm not excluded from this happens to me sometimes too. But when we come back to, okay, let's ground into ourselves, let's know and anchor into the trust that we're fine. We look around, we realize, yeah, we're safe. We've got everything that we can have under control. Right now, there's nothing lacking. Right now, we are financially secure, very likely. And so you go through the needs and you see, okay, everything is covered right now. I don't really need to feel threatened. And you relax into it, and suddenly reality becomes reality again. As before, oftentimes it just feels like not reality. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, so how I'm interpreting that is we create mind stories. We're constantly creating mind stories that are not necessarily true. And so allowing ourselves to get into that neutral space, that is really the place where we can make better decisions. And when we're talking human design and we're talking about people who have a lot of emotional waves and are not waiting for clarity, all of the different decisions that you make, and I call it, my trauma goggles, right? I put my trauma goggles on, and now I'm in a very low wave, and I'm going to start making big decisions from that space. And it's a mind story, because once you allow that clarity to come on in, it almost, if there were dark clouds around, it's almost like the sky is blue, and I can make a better choice for myself from this grounded space versus from a place of fear or a place of hypervigilance or a place where, my mind story is taking me because of my life story or past experiences. I think that is that loop, right, that we get stuck in around the stories that we have told ourselves for years and years, and we get stuck in that loop, which makes it very difficult for us to step outside. And you're right, like there's a 3D going on. And within that 3D, within that scope, so many of us are coming in and out of our emotions.
Yeah, I really like what you said about making big decisions to get out of the low, because that is something I do see happening quite a lot. The feeling is so uncomfortable with that people are like, what can I do to make this end? How did I, how can I correct what I supposedly did incorrectly that got me here, which is just an illusion. Nothing, you didn't do anything that got you into the low. the low is just part of your experience.
Yeah, well, a lot of our behavior is reactive. We react to the stressors, the triggers, the things that jump in front of us. We are reacting. And it's that reptilian brain that has that coping mechanism so dialed in that it already knows that A plus B is going to equal C. And that is where, we talk about the centers and the needs of each center, whether it is defined or open, and how a lot of this can be very predictable. And that is where that prediction comes from, is that we react to things quite often on autopilot. We don't even have to think. And so what this heart alignment exercise helps you to do, it helps align your heart with your brain so that your brain stops feeling that fear and that need to protect you, and that heart can guide you forward, can catapult you into the things that you really desire, but that you're so afraid of actually either A, making a mistake, B, not being seen. Like, there's so many different pieces that fear stops us from tapping into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I want to pick up one last thing. You kind of touched on a little bit, looking at definition versus open or undefined centers. And I'm wondering, because you're quite an open person, I'm quite an open person, there is not a lot of definition. What is your take on seeing someone who's very defined versus seeing someone who's very open? Would you be able to sum up your take on the common, maybe, challenges for each? I mean, as we say, human design is so individual. So if you can't give an answer to this, that's fine as well. I'm just curious whether you've observed something from your perspective, from your work, and perhaps the strengths that go with that.
What I notice is a lot of sensitivity around the openness, a lot of sensitivity, because we're consistently being bombarded with energy that even, the person who has that definition can't even, they don't have the awareness that they're showing up in this way. And yet you have the awareness as the person who knows or is more aware of the centers. You're receiving it and you're recognizing it. And what I tend to work with is the openness around creating more resiliency and understanding where that energy does not belong to me. And when it is defined, as knowing that it doesn't always have to be your way, right? Because there's so much stability and consistency in that energy, where when you start to soften, especially us as women, right? We show up in our warrior suits, and that energy becomes very dense, and it's like, whoa, like, for us with so much openness, we're just like, yeah, no, like, not happening. So it allows that energy to soften so that it can be received. And that is really the beautiful part of working with the balancing act, of learning how to recognize when something is not yours, and that you can have the resiliency to allow it to go through as you're processing, and not creating that mind story and letting that mind story dictate your next move. And also allowing that softening of the centers, softening of that energy, so that it is just easier to digest for the people around you. And so I have a client that I'm working with right now, and she's completely defined, which is what, like,
Wow.
less than 1% of the population.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh, I'm so lucky. And it is interesting because the story is, I don't get along with my parents. I've never had a great relationship with the family. And what I'm picking up on is, wow, I wonder how much openness there is in your parents, and how very dense and heavy this energy must have been, right? A manifesting generator with all of this definition. And just thinking about all of that energy and the busyness and the anger and the frustration from a child, how difficult it would be as a parent to be able to guide and lead someone who already has figured it all out in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see the disruption in that system.
Yeah, that is fascinating to me. And I guess the person itself would feel, or themselves would feel like there isn't much mm, space to be any different because I guess you know your energy so well and you can tune it, like you say. I love that you can soften into it, you can tune it up or you can turn it down, and not as in numb it or cancel it, but rather in, if I think about my defined root center, I can totally see when I am in overexertion of the energy and I just lean in and go with it versus a more healthy, relaxed expression of it, even though the pulse is on. So there is, I definitely resonate with what you said about being able to soften into it. Um, yeah, fascinating. That's so interesting to think about a fully defined person. I'm assuming, are they a split too?
Yeah, of course. It's like the other rarity, quadruple split. So, yeah, there's a lot of disconnection in how to feel, right? How are you feeling when you don't have the bridge to complete you? So, a lot of complexity, but that's what makes it so fun because for me it's fascinating and I get really excited because I get to work with someone who is so uniquely built and who is thirsty to be seen and to be heard and to be validated. And this is where human design really does that for a lot of us, right? Where we're like, ah, how do you know this about me? Like I've never shared that with anyone. And it just becomes these beautiful aha moments of permission slips to step into your power instead of what your parents' experience of that energy was, or the caretakers, or the people around you who couldn't understand the intensity of your energy and took it personal, like an attack. Like this is more personal than it should be. And so that's what I really, really enjoy it. I love softening people. And I notice that a lot of the intensity comes from like the I was going to say time benders, the manifesting generators that I work with. A lot of really, really big energy. And it's just fun to watch them slow down intentionally and then recognizing all of the little details, all the little nuances of their experience as they're slowing down. I think that is really my favorite piece of when I'm working with people. And with projectors is allowing them to take space, take up space and stand up for themselves. And my experience with one particular projector is inviting her to join a jujitsu class with her daughter and watching her projector daughter start to take up space, not just in the dojo, but outside of the dojo, knowing that it's safe for her because she has the tools to self-protect.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just, to me, it's fascinating how, excuse me, one little tweak in our mind and it shifts everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And like that, it's again this balance between mind and body, because sometimes I feel like we get carried away, or let me speak for myself, I get carried away with the mind being so annoying with all its beliefs and and the stories and the memories of past trauma or experiences that you carry forward with into the future. And then we have these moments of the mind being so incredibly smart and you being able to change the path forward because something clicks on a mental place, or the mind being able to interpret emotions and figure out, you know, like the mind observing the mind, realizing we're looping here right now. We really need the awareness. We really need the mind, even though I'm looking at my cat right now and sometimes we all say, oh, I wish I could just live the life of a cat. And I'm like, no, like we incarnated as humans because we wanted this awareness, we wanted this experience. And yes, it would be a lot easier if we didn't have it, but it's really just also where the fun lies.
Yeah, we are wired for connection. We are wired for connection, and for some reason, well, I mean, being human is quite complicated, It's not like we have a manuscript that tells us how we're supposed to do things. So even on that plane, we're consistently experimenting, and we're given the opportunity with these tools to really dive deep into this experiment and to get more joy out of it if possible. It's not about what the pain is. I think once you step into this work with the nervous system, you start to recognize that things can be rewired. That just because I grew up this way and it was so rigid, that there is no room for flexibility. It's unwinding that nervous system, unwinding, and it takes time and it takes effort, but it doesn't have to be so painful.
Mm-hmm.
It is painful, I believe, when the energy is just sitting there and you're not doing anything with it. That's when you're lurking in that big, muddy, pond. And as you start to bring little flowers into that muddy pond and some sunshine, that mud is going to dry up and maybe some dirt is going to start to come through, and you'll be able to plant more of a garden and leave that little muddy water behind, because it is possible. When we look at it from the mind, the body, and the soul, we have so much opportunity to combine this three-legged stool to create a very good foundation, so that when things do get a little wonky, that you know that you'll always come back to the basics and you're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Great way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you. My last question is, if people want to connect with you, if they want to find you, where is the best space for them to do that?
I really enjoy Instagram because it's just like whatever shows up, and it's almost like a deck of cards. What am I going to pull today? And you open up the app and there's messages always sitting there when you're following someone and when the energy is just right. So Instagram is really my favorite place. And then of course my website has a lot of other information there. So I would love to see anyone connect and send me a message. I always love to interact with people and understand where they're at and see how we fit and what we can do to help alleviate. No one should suffer alone, and no one should be in pain. And I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can give you space so that you don't have to carry such a big load on your own.
Hmm. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom and your stories with us. Yeah, I really appreciated this conversation.
Thank you for having me.